welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. This week we're going to look at a fun family game called Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule. This is a very family-friendly children's game about set collection and hand management, where the objective of the game is to have a complete hand of either 6 fairies in your hand or having no goblins left in your hand at the end of the game. As soon as you're able to do that, you pretty much win the game instantly. In the game, players will have fairy cards and goblin cards, which will allow them to use rhyme and also image matching to get cards from a center pile and move them from their hand and back and forth to the center pile. It's a very quick, easy playing family game. It's played from 1 to 4 players, ages 7 and up, but quite honestly, thanks to nice imagery and different images on all the cards, any child who's able to memorize the images can very easily learn to play this game, and actually a child who can't read or is a very beginning reader can actually help, through playing this game, learn and improve their reading skills. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule retails for about $15, and for that $15 you're actually getting a pretty decent amount of stuff. You're getting 20 different double-sided cards that actually have really good artwork on them. The front of each card is going to have some nice little fairy artwork on it, which is nice and family friendly, and the family friendliness theme is going to carry on throughout the entire game, from the simplicity of the rules to the artwork and everything used in the game. The back side of every card is also going to have a different goblin image on it. And all these cards, there's 20 different cards. The front of every goblin or front of every card is going to have a fairy symbol on it, and the reverse side is going to have a goblin symbol on it. Now these cards are oversized cards. They're larger than your standard card. I'd say probably about 1.5 times larger, which is really nice, especially for smaller hands. And again, this is a family-friendly children's game, so anything that makes it more family-friendly or child-friendly is definitely a bonus in this game. But the cards are extra size and they have a laminate on them, which is very nice. And the cards are really hardy and durable. I mean, if you just fan through them, you can hear there's a good snap to them. They're pretty good cards. Again, very nice laminate on them, good quality, and I actually like the family-friendly artwork. They did a great job on the artwork for the cards, both front and back side. And again, all the cards have their own unique images, so you're looking at 40 different pieces of good artwork on good quality cardstock that's laminated and oversized. Plus the game comes with a really nice tin. It is a metal tin, which is with its own artwork, and it has a nice storage component. Really just a small little package. You're paying $15, you're getting your money's worth. Really good components, good cards, good package. I like what they did here. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is extremely easy to play and teach. It is really so simple that literally a 4-year-old can actually play this game, even if they don't know how to read, even though there are reading skills involved. But thanks again to the fact that every single card has this unique piece of artwork, any child can just look at the images and associate the name on the card with the image, which is very easy because they actually match. For example, a card that says OPU is a couple goblins holding their nose, so a child can easily figure that out, that that's the OPU card. Whereas opposed to the card that's big belly is a goblin with a large belly. And He's So Smelly is a goblin that's holding a nose with a clothespin over his nose. And even on the fairy side, for the most part, you get the same type of thing. For example, the fairy card Goldilocks, think Goldilocks and the 3 bears. There's a fairy with her 3 bear friends. And then there's Hula Hoop, which is a fairy. Well, she's got a hula hoop around her waist. So again, really easy. You don't need to be a reader, but it's going to make the game a little bit easier, which is great for the game. The front of every single card is going to have a fairy image on the front, and the reverse side is going to have a goblin image, and that goes for all the cards in the game. Additionally, there's 4 additional images for all the cards. You'll see it's over on the corners. For example, there's a mushroom, and the opposite side of every mushroom card is a frog symbol. The other symbol you're going to see is a sun symbol, and the back side of every sun symbol is going to be a moon, and that goes consistently for all the cards. Moon symbol, flip side is going to have a sun symbol. Frog symbol, flip side is going to have a mushroom symbol. Frog, again, the flip side is going to have a mushroom symbol. And that works on the game's natural set collection. Now additionally, there's 4 wild cards that come in the game, and there's 4 fairy wild cards, and there's 4 goblin wild cards, and they're not on the opposite side. So for example, the fairy wild card, and the way you tell it's a wild card is the stars around it. If you flip it over, it's not a wild card on the back side. This fairy card again is a star, which is a wild card. You flip it over, it's not a wild card on the back side. But if you take this Goblin card, again the stars denote the wild card, you flip it over on the back side, it's a fairy, not a wild card. And that's important, I'll show you why in a few moments. Now I'm going to show you the basic way how to play Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule, and there's a nice little addition to the game. I'll go over it in my final thoughts of the game, but there's actually a reverse version of the game called Goblins Rule and Fairies Drool, and basically you're just reversing all the rules. But the nice little point is it's actually kind of cool for younger boys who don't want to play with fairies. They want to play with goblins, so you can just reverse the rules, which is pretty cool, but we'll get into that in a second. I'm just going to show you how to play the actual game. Now to start, each player is going to get a wild card goblin. Again, the wild cards are the ones with the stars around them. And then they're going to randomly get 3 additional goblin cards. And again, this is going to be for every player, so the other player will get a wild card plus 3 additional random goblin cards. Now the game does come with 4 of the wild cards, so the 2 wild cards in a 2-player game that weren't selected are going to be removed from the game, so make sure you don't include those cards in the game, otherwise you can actually cause issues later on. But again, 1 random wild card for each player, and then 3 non-wild cards. Remove the other 2 wild cards from the game, and then you're going to take 4 random fairy cards and you're going to place them in the center, and these are going to be your fairy ring at the start of the game. And again, it's all random, really doesn't matter which cards you pick, just make sure, and this is very important, you remove any wild cards that aren't selected by a player. So for a 2-player game, you're only going to have 2 of those goblin wild cards starting. 3-player game, you're going to use 3 of them, and all 4 of them. And in a 4-player game, you're going to use all 4 of those goblin wild cards. Now, Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is a very simple game of rhyme and symbol matching. On a player's turn, they're simply going to take a card from their hand, move it to the fairy ring, and then they're going to do the rhyming part of the game. So the card that you put in the fairy ring, any cards that rhyme with that card are going to flip over. So we have a card called Nappy Hour, which is a goblin we add to the ring. We're going to look for any cards that happen to rhyme with that. Now, Sweet and Sour and Nappy Hour rhyme. And of course, if you are questioning any of these, if some of them rhyme, most of them are pretty self-explanatory and pretty obvious, but if you're ever wondering if cards actually rhyme, there is a list in the rule book that has all the cards that rhyme, and they come in sets. There's different sets of rhyming, and it definitely tells you which cards rhyme, so if you ever have any confusion, it's definitely laid out in the rule book. After you flipped over any cards that happen to rhyme with the card that you played into the fairy ring, you're simply going to take any cards in the fairy ring that match the symbol of the card that you placed, but you don't take the card you placed back. So I placed a card with a moon symbol, so now I get to add Poppy Smock, which is a moon symbol, and I get to add Snowflake Shelly to my hand because it also has a moon symbol. That's the end of my turn. Now, if at this point, if you'd reached the win condition, you instantly win the game and the game's over. If you haven't reached the win condition, it's going to be the next player's turn. And then the next player is going to basically do the exact same thing. They're going to take one of the cards from their hand, they're going to add it to the fairy ring, they're going to find any cards that happen to rhyme with that card. So Cuckoo Clock rhymes with sock, so we'll flip the sock card over, but it doesn't rhyme with any other cards. So now we look for any frog symbols that match the frog symbol on the card we played. If there are any, we're going to take it and add it to our hand. If there are no cards, we're not going to do anything. In this instance, that's why I picked that card to show you. Now, the only caveat to the rhyming part of the cards is anytime you play a wild card, which is one of the cards with the stars on it, you're not going to rhyme. You're just going to flip over all the cards except for the card that you put in the fairy ring. So if I played Chicken Pock, I'm going to flip over every single card left in the fairy ring at this point. And then I'm going to look for any moon cards, and if there are any, I'm going to add them to my hand. And again, you're going to look for the win condition. If you've reached it, you've won. If not, you're simply going to move to the next player's turn. Players are going to continue just continually placing a card in the fairy ring, flipping if they match, or if it's a wild card, we're going to make sure we flip over all the cards, grabbing the matching cards, putting them back in our hand, even if that means we end up with more goblins back in our hand because we're not making good decisions. And the game's going to continue on like this until you either have no goblins left in your hand, or if at the end of your hand you happen to have 6 fairies left in your hand, even if you happen to have some extra goblins. If you have 6 fairies left in your hand, you've won the game. Every time I do a review for a board game, I always like to take a few moments to talk about how family friendly a board or card game just happens to be. And I also normally show you a sample gameplay, but I don't think it's really going to be necessary for this game. And I'm actually going to do a little picture-in-picture for you of a family game between myself and my two sons. So you're going to see this going on in one of the corners of the screen. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. I'm trying something a little bit different here to make the video a little bit smaller and see if this is something that people are going to like. Now, Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is a extremely family-friendly game. From the imagery to the simplicity of the rules to everything going on, it's very, very simple for anyone to understand. My 5-year-old can play this game. Now, admittedly, he's an early reader. He's not a great reader. He's still reading at about the Bob book levels, but he's able to sound out words. But even himself, looking at some of the bigger words in this game like dewdrop shower or Goldilocks or cobweb shock, the images on the cards all match the words for these cards, so he's actually learning to associate the images with the words, and it's actually helping him to learn how to read, and it's actually a kind of a nice little bonus of the game. And I want to give the producers of this game a definite thumbs up on that aspect. That was very smart of them to do, to add all these images that match the words of the game. It makes this game even more family friendly. When I first saw the game, before I knew much about it, I was kind of leery because I didn't know how easy it'd be for a pre-reader to play this game, because I saw some of the words on these cards. And while most of them aren't too bad, there are some that are a little bit larger words that may be a little more challenging, but luckily all the words match the images on the cards very, very, very much. I'll just go through and show you a few of them. Big, big belly, I showed you earlier, it's a goblin with a large belly. Earwax stew, you see a funny goblin making some stew. Easy right there. Dusty Dower, he's a dust bunny. Nervous Nelly, he's a goblin that looks nervous. Again, all the images are very, very much matching all the cards. The gameplay for the game is very simple. It's simply play a card, look for rhyme, take back cards that have a matching symbol. But it's not so simplistic that there's actually no strategy of the game. There's actually strategy of this game, and that's kind of the interesting thing about it. It looks like a kind of a silly little kid's game. But if you play this game a couple times, you're going to learn there's actually strategy to it. And I've actually played this game with both my boys and intentionally played bad just to see if, you know, how lucky this game is. And believe it or not, my youngest one won 3 games in a row just because he was using the best strategy. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule, definitely a really good family game. Very easy for kids to understand. Great for kids of any age, pretty much, I think. Just do the images. I'd say 4 and up. The package says 7 up. I can easily say a 4-year-old can play this game just by looking at the images, especially if a parent's willing to sit down and help them, especially when a child plays a card. Just read the card out loud for the child. Child plays that card, just say, oh, you played Willow Sue, and point out the cards in the middle of the fairy ring and just start reading them off, and they're going to be able to see association. If my child plays Willow Sue and I say, oh, we have Sweet and Sour, Rainbow Swoop, Snowflake Shelly, and Poppy Smock, a child's going to be able to hear those words and start getting the association and definitely be able to figure out the game. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rules lists as a game for 2 to 4 players, and I've actually had the most fun playing this with 3 and 4 players. 2 players wasn't bad. It's definitely enjoyable playing with 2 players, but I've only had 2 2-player games, and the very first time I played this game was a 2-player game, and it seemed like, I don't know if it's just the mindsets we were getting into, but we seem to be having a lot of going back and forth where we seem to be playing a lot of the same cards until somebody was willing to take the sacrifice and play a card that allow an opponent to play. So I think 3 and 4, there's a little bit more variety to the game. You saw more cards entering the fairy ring versus just a 2-player game where it seemed like it was limited because you basically only had 12 cards to shuffle through. Whereas in a 3-player game, you're going through 16 cards, and in a 4-player game, you're getting all 20 of those cards, and that's going to add a lot more of the shuffling, and you're going to see the fairy ring move around a lot more. I never saw it to the point in a 2-player game where nobody had a move, but I have seen it in a 2-player game where somebody felt like, I have only one move, and my opponent's going to be able to capitalize off that. And to be honest, it's a kid's game. I don't think any child's really going to be complacent about that, but some parents may notice that if they're playing just with a parent with one child. But if you have 2 children, or if you have a husband, wife, and 2 children, great game, lots of variety, plays great, 3 or 4 players. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is a deceptively simple family kids game, but not so simple that there's actually no strategy to it. There's a little bit of strategy to this game, which actually really adds the replay value of the game. Now, a lot of children's games can be very, very boring for adults because they're either overly simplistic There's no strategy to it, or it's basically just a roll and move, and parents are just sitting back doing it as more of an activity just to interact with their kids versus it being a really much of a challenge, and it gets kind of boring for adults. Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is not one of those kind of games. There is actually a deep strategy to it, which makes it enjoyable, but it's not so challenging to play that younger children can't play it, which is definitely a bonus. The quality of the components is really good. There's some fantastic art on the game. The game comes with 20 different cards with 40 different pieces of art on it. 20 for the goblins, 20 for the fairies. And as a nice little bonus, there's some alternate rules that come with the game. Now, it doesn't make the game play any differently, but you know, boys will be boys. And if you tell them fairies, they're kind of like, eh. You tell them goblins, they're like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. So just a simple reversing of all the rules, whereas instead of trying to capture all the fairies, you're trying to capture all the goblins. You know, some kids like that, and it's an extra option. And my boys, actually, we play the opposite. We play Goblins Rule, Fairies Drool all the time, and that's just what they want to do. But it's kind of cool that it's actually included in the game. I want to say thanks for the designers to actually include that little aspect, because when I saw the original game with Fairies Rule and I showed it to my kids, they kind of looked at it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "No, Dad." But when I found out that you can actually play the reverse, for some reason it clicked for them. Yeah, boys will be boys. What can I say? The bottom line is Goblins Drool's Fairy Rule is a fun family game for kids of all ages, and it's not going to be boring for adults. There is some good strategy to the game. It's not 100% random. It's not 100% of a luck fest. This is actually a game with enough strategy to play and enjoy for the entire family. It plays 1 to 4 players. There's a solo rules, and basically it's just trying to see how many moves you can actually complete the fairy ring in. Can you do in less moves than the last time you played it? Add in more cards, make it more challenging. Now, it's not really deep. You're probably not going to play the solitaire rules a whole bunch of times. You may play it just a few times just to check it out. And maybe if you have like a 9 or 10-year-old child who is wanting to play the game, they can definitely play the solitaire rules just like that themselves. It's not a big thing, but it's a nice little additional inclusion to the game. And that's what I like. They included some extra bonuses for the game. The solitaire rules, the reverse and the rules, all definite little extras that are really, really cool. If you're looking for a nice family-friendly card game to play with your children anywhere from ages 4 all the way up, Goblins Drool, Fairies Rule is a fun family game. Go ahead and check it out. This has been another off-the-shelf board game review. Thanks for watching.